I always thought entrepreneurship was for people who were born with some magic spark, like they were born to be the next Steve Jobs or Elon Musk. Growing up, I was the last person anyone would expect to start their own business. I was that kid who hated math, couldn't do public speaking without freezing up, and had no idea what to do after high school. But one day, everything changed. Let me start from the beginning. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, and to say I was a mediocre student would be generous. I was good at a few things: video games, sketching, and writing, but nothing that really screamed future business mogul. My parents were both hard-working folks who had stable jobs. My dad worked in a factory, and my mom was a nurse. They were comfortable, but not rich, and I never felt that entrepreneurial energy growing up. I always thought I'd follow the same pattern: graduate high school, maybe go to community college, get a normal job, and live a quiet life. But somewhere in the back of my mind, there was always this nagging feeling that I wanted more. I didn't want to be stuck in the same routine forever, working for someone else. I didn't have the courage to admit it at the time, but I knew deep down that I was destined to do something different. I just didn't know what. Then, in my senior year of high school, everything changed. It started with a simple conversation. My friend Alex, who had a reputation for being a bit of a hustler, told me he had just launched an online store selling custom t-shirts. He made enough money to buy himself a brand new laptop, and that blew my mind. It wasn't like he was some tech genius. He was just a regular guy like me. But he had figured something out that I hadn't. The next few weeks, I spent hours talking to Alex about his business. He walked me through how he got started, how he found a supplier, set up his website, and marketed his shirts on Instagram. To be honest, I didn't fully understand everything at first, but the idea that someone like me could actually make money online without any special skills was something I had never considered before. That conversation planted the seed. Fast forward a few months, and I graduated high school. I had no idea what I wanted to do next. I wasn't ready for college, and I wasn't excited about the idea of getting a regular job. So, after some soul-searching, I decided to take a leap and try my hand at launching my own online store. I figured, what I have to lose? At first, everything felt impossible. I didn't have a lot of money, and I definitely didn't have any experience with e-commerce. I remember staying up late reading blog posts and watching YouTube tutorials, trying to figure out how to set up my store. I knew nothing about web design, so I used a template to build a simple website on Shopify. My first product was a set of custom phone cases. I thought, everyone has a phone, so this could work. I spent hours designing them, experimenting with colors, and trying to make something that would stand out. But when I finally launched my site, nothing happened. No orders, no traffic, no buzz. I felt like I had put my heart into it, but the world didn't care. I was crushed. I took a few days to sulk. I had put myself out there, and I felt like a failure before I even got started. But then I remembered something Alex had told me: you don't make money unless people know about you. So, I decided to shift gears and focus on marketing. I started by posting on Instagram, using hashtags and reaching out to influencers who could promote my product. I sent free cases to people with big followings in exchange for a shout-out. I didn't have the budget to run ads, so I had to get creative. Slowly, very slowly, my followers started growing, and I began getting some small orders. The breakthrough came when I ran my first giveaway. I offered one of my phone cases for free to anyone who followed my page and tagged a friend. That simple strategy skyrocketed my follower count. People love free stuff, and it got me noticed. By the end of the week, I had my first real sales, and I felt like I had cracked the code. But it wasn't smooth sailing from there. With every milestone, there were new challenges. Shipping delays, customer complaints, and inventory issues kept popping up. I was learning everything on the fly. I spent countless hours doing everything myself: designing products, handling customer service, packing orders, and posting on social media. But something kept me going. The idea that I was building something from the ground up, something that could be mine. The next big lesson came when I started reinvesting all my profits back into the business. I wasn't paying myself anything in the beginning. Instead, I bought better equipment, upgraded my website, and expanded my product range. Eventually, I saved enough money to pay for Facebook ads. I knew I needed to scale, but it was a bit scary at first. If the ads didn't work, I'd be throwing money down the drain. I remember the first time I saw a sale come through from an ad. I nearly fell out of my chair. It worked. The ad brought in traffic, and the traffic brought in sales. Over the next few months, my business grew exponentially. I wasn't just selling phone cases anymore. I expanded into custom t-shirts, hoodies, and mugs. By the end of my first year, I had made over $100,000 in revenue. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a solid start, and it felt incredible. That's when I realized that entrepreneurship wasn't about some grand idea or magic spark. It was about perseverance. It was about trying and failing and trying again. Most importantly, it was about being willing to learn, adapt, and keep moving forward when everything seemed impossible. Looking back, I'm proud of how far I've come. I went from a kid who didn't know what he wanted to do with his life to running a successful online business. But I won't pretend it's been easy. There were plenty of sleepless nights, moments of self-doubt, and times when I thought about quitting. But every time I wanted to give up, I remembered why I started in the first place, the desire to create something that was truly mine. I'm not a millionaire yet, but I'm on my way. The business is still growing, and I've expanded into new markets and products. I now employ a small team, and I'm working on building an even bigger brand. I still have a lot to learn, but I know that the journey is worth it. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that entrepreneurship is not about having everything figured out from the start. It's about starting with what you have, taking risks, and learning from every mistake. So, if you're sitting there wondering if you can do it, trust me, you can. Just take the first step, even if it's small, and keep moving forward. You'll surprise yourself. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I was 24, broke, living with my mom, and had no clue what I was doing with my life. I'd been bouncing between jobs that barely paid my rent and trying to find something that made sense. Every day felt like I was just going through the motions, trying to survive instead of thrive. I had dreams of starting my own business, but I always thought it was too late for me. Most people around me, even my friends, had given up on their dreams too. They'd resigned themselves to the idea that working a dead-end job was the way life worked. It was a Sunday afternoon when everything changed. I was sitting on the couch in my mom's living room, flipping through Reddit, when I stumbled across a post about a guy who started a successful e-commerce store with barely any experience. He built it up from scratch, learned along the way, and now it was making him enough money to quit his job and live comfortably. Something clicked inside me when I read that. I thought, why not me? Why can't I do that? I didn't have a lot of money saved up. In fact, I was living paycheck to paycheck, but I knew I had to make a move. I couldn't keep living this way, stuck in the cycle of mediocrity. So, I spent the next couple of days obsessively researching how to start an online store. I watched YouTube videos, read articles, and even took some free courses to understand e-commerce. The more I learned, the more confident I felt. After a week of diving deep into the basics, I decided I would launch my own business. I had always been passionate about fitness, and it seemed like the perfect niche. But I wasn't ready to start selling products right away. Instead, I decided to focus on building an audience first. I created an Instagram account, shared fitness tips, posted motivational quotes, and connected with others in the fitness community. Slowly, but surely, my follower count started to grow. About 2 months into this, I felt ready to take the next step. I had around 5,000 followers, which wasn't huge, but it was enough to start testing products. I launched my e-commerce store, selling fitness gear and supplements that I knew people would need. The first few weeks were a struggle, and honestly, I didn't make any sales. I kept pushing though, tweaking my ads, adjusting my website, and trying to learn what worked. It wasn't until my 3rd month that things started to turn around. I invested a bit more money into Facebook ads, targeting the right audience, and suddenly the sales started coming in. Slowly, but surely, my store gained traction. I kept learning, kept experimenting, and kept pushing. Every day was a new challenge, but I was determined to make it work. By the time I hit my 6-month mark, I was pulling in $10,000 a month in revenue. At that point, I decided to quit my job. I wasn't making enough yet to live luxuriously, but I was finally making enough to live on my own and have the freedom to focus on my business full-time. It was one of the scariest decisions I've ever made, but also one of the best. I moved into a small apartment and dedicated every waking moment to my business. I stayed up late working on new strategies, improving the website, reaching out to influencers for promotions, and constantly testing new products. Eventually, I hit a point where I had to hire help. I hired my first virtual assistant to handle customer service, which freed me up to focus on marketing and growing the business. That was another scary moment because now I had to rely on someone else to help make sure my business ran smoothly. As the months passed, my sales grew steadily. It wasn't easy, but it was a whole lot better than working a job I hated. By the time I hit my one-year anniversary, my business was making $30,000 a month in revenue. It felt surreal. I had gone from being broke and living with my mom to owning my own business that was now my full-time job. I remember the first time I got a real paycheck from my business. It wasn't huge, but it was mine. It was something I had built with my own hands, my own sweat, and my own persistence. I treated myself to a nice dinner, something I hadn't been able to do in years, and for the first time in a long time, I felt proud. But the journey wasn't over. I still had a long way to go. As the business grew, I faced new challenges. There were supply chain issues, customer complaints, and marketing strategies that didn't work. There were moments of self-doubt where I wondered if I could keep going. But I never quit. I kept pushing, kept learning, and kept moving forward. By my second year, I had expanded my product line and even started offering online coaching for people who wanted to take their fitness to the next level. I hired a few more people to help with fulfillment and customer service, and my brand started to gain more recognition. The best part was that I was no longer just some guy sitting on his mom's couch, scrolling through Reddit. I had created something that was real, something that mattered to people. Today, my business generates over $100,000 a month in revenue. I have a small team of people who help me run everything. I don't work 80-hour weeks anymore, but I still work hard. I get to make my own schedule, travel when I want, and most importantly, I get to help others. Fitness has become more than just a passion for me. It's become a way to positively impact people's lives. Looking back, I can hardly believe how far I've come. There were so many moments where I thought about giving up. So many late nights where I wasn't sure if it would all be worth it. But every single moment, every mistake, every failure has led me to where I am today. If you're reading this and you're in a place where I was, stuck, unsure of what your next step should be, I want you to know something. It's never too late. There will always be challenges. There will always be setbacks. But if you want something bad enough, you can make it happen. It's all about taking that first step and not stopping, no matter how hard it gets. Believe in yourself, put in the work, and keep pushing. You can do it. I was working my 9-to-5 job as a middle manager at a corporate firm in the city. The hours were long, the pay was decent, but I knew deep down that I wasn't truly fulfilled. There was a feeling, always lingering in the back of my mind, that I was meant to be doing something bigger, something more meaningful. I had this drive that I couldn't quite explain, but it felt like my life wasn't moving in the right direction. It wasn't that I hated the job, but it just wasn't enough. I felt like I was slowly being drained, and every time I looked out the office window, I couldn't help but wonder what it would feel like to truly be my own boss. Then came that one day in 2018 when it all clicked. I was sitting at my desk, scrolling through my email when I saw an article pop up about an entrepreneur who had built a multi-million-dollar business from the ground up. It was a story of grit, failure, and eventual success. I read it and thought, why can't that be me? I immediately felt the urge to take a leap, to start something of my own. But of course, that wasn't easy. I had a mortgage, student loans, and responsibilities that didn't exactly scream, leave your job and take a risk. But the seed was planted. I started researching. I spent hours on nights and weekends learning everything I could about entrepreneurship. I followed blogs, listened to podcasts, read books. I began to analyze industries, niches, trends, everything that could potentially give me an edge in this business world. There was one industry that kept popping up again and again, e-commerce. It felt like the perfect opportunity, low overhead costs, scalability, and the ability to start small with relatively little investment. It was scary as hell. I felt a mixture of excitement and fear, but something inside me pushed me forward. After all, I had nothing to lose, right? I wasn't going to get any younger sitting behind a desk, doing the same thing day in and day out. I was ready to give it a shot. I didn't just quit my job, though. I wasn't stupid. I knew I had to plan. I set a date, which was a few months down the road, to start my side hustle while still holding on to my day job. I saved up as much money as I could, cutting back on expenses, staying in on weekends, not eating out, and, in general, living frugally. In my free time, I started learning how to build an online store. Shopify was my platform of choice, and I spent countless hours watching YouTube tutorials and reading forums. I found a niche that I believed had potential: eco-friendly products. The world was shifting towards sustainability, and I thought I could ride that wave. I ordered my first batch of products: reusable water bottles, bamboo toothbrushes, and other sustainable items. I took the plunge with a small budget, focusing mainly on product quality and design. The website wasn't perfect, but it was functional. I didn't let perfectionism hold me back. I launched it with the bare minimum and started pushing traffic to the site through social media. The first month was rough. I sold a couple of items, but the sales didn't really pick up. There were days when I wanted to quit. I'd be up late, staring at the screen, watching the sales come in at a trickle. My family and friends didn't really understand what I was doing. They thought it was just another phase, something that would pass once the novelty wore off. But I wasn't ready to give up. I was determined to figure out what was wrong and fix it. I started reading everything I could find about e-commerce marketing: Facebook ads, Instagram influencers, Google Shopping. It was like a whole new language to me. I spent money on ads that didn't work, trying different strategies, tweaking my approach each time. And then, slowly but surely, it started to work. My first real sale came from a Facebook ad, which felt like the most amazing thing in the world. I was over the moon. The feedback from customers was positive, and I could feel the momentum building. By the time I hit 6 months of running my side business, I was getting enough traction that I knew I had to make a decision. My day job was demanding more of my time, and my business was growing fast enough that I couldn't juggle both anymore. I knew I had to choose. It wasn't an easy decision. Leaving a steady paycheck was terrifying. But after a lot of soul-searching, I made the leap. I handed in my resignation, with no backup plan other than my e-commerce business. There were no guarantees, but I felt ready to fully commit. The first few months after I quit were a whirlwind. I worked from morning to night, constantly refining my strategies, testing new products, expanding my offerings. I learned a lot of hard lessons, some that cost me money, others that cost me time. But each mistake was a lesson. Each failure taught me something new. A breakthrough moment came when I collaborated with an eco-influencer for a sponsored post. The result was nothing short of incredible. The influencer's audience was exactly the demographic I needed, and I saw a huge spike in sales. It was a reminder that in business, who you know and how you position yourself can make all the difference. After that, I started reaching out to more influencers and brands for collaborations, which helped boost my credibility and visibility. By the end of my first year of full-time entrepreneurship, my business was generating enough revenue to comfortably cover my bills. It wasn't making me rich, but I was proud of what I'd built. I had gone from someone working a corporate job to someone running their own business, and I was loving it. My days were no longer about waking up early to punch the clock. They were about building something from scratch and seeing it grow, step by step. It hasn't been a perfect journey. There are days when I feel like giving up, days when sales drop, and days when everything feels overwhelming. But every time I hit a rough patch, I remind myself how far I've come. From the day I decided to take the leap and start a side hustle to the moment I became a full-time entrepreneur, it has been a roller coaster. But it has been worth every second. I'm still building, still learning, and still growing. The best part? I'm doing it on my own terms. I don't know what the future holds, but I've learned that success isn't a straight line. It's a journey with ups and downs, and as long as you keep going, you'll get there. If I can do it, anyone can. I started my entrepreneurial journey at 22, fresh out of college with a degree in computer science. I had no money, no connections, and, honestly, no real idea of what I was doing. But I had something else, a deep hunger to create something of my own, to build something that would last. It all began in a tiny apartment with peeling walls and an old laptop that barely ran. I remember spending hours in front of that screen, bouncing from idea to idea, feeling overwhelmed by the vastness of the internet and all the opportunities it presented. But then, like a bolt of lightning, an idea struck. What if I could build a platform that helped people find freelance work in a more efficient and transparent way? At the time, freelance platforms like Upwork and Fiverr existed, but they were, in my opinion, clunky and not very user-friendly. I envisioned a website where freelancers could create detailed profiles, set their own rates, and have direct communication with clients. No middleman taking a chunk of their hard-earned money. A place where quality work could speak for itself, not hidden behind a maze of categories or confusing pricing systems. The problem? I had no budget, no team, and most importantly, no experience building a platform like that. So, I started small. I began coding late into the night after work. I took a job as a junior developer at a small tech company to pay the bills, but every free moment was spent learning and developing the prototype of my platform. The first few months were grueling, filled with moments of self-doubt and countless bugs that seemed impossible to fix. But I was determined. I remember when I first launched a basic version of my site. It wasn't much, just a landing page with a sign-up form and a couple of features I was proud of, but it was something. I sent it out to a few friends, all of whom were freelancers in various fields, to get feedback. The response was overwhelming. Sure, there were a lot of issues with the site, but people could see the potential. They were excited. But that excitement quickly turned to frustration as I hit a major roadblock: marketing. I had no idea how to get users to my site. I posted on Reddit, shared it with my social media networks, and even paid for some online ads, but it was like shouting into the void. The traffic was minimal, and the feedback was more critical than encouraging. I was spending every penny of my savings just to keep the website running, and the bills were piling up faster than I could handle. After about 6 months, I realized I couldn't continue on this path alone. I needed help, real help, from people who knew what they were doing. But how could I afford to hire anyone? I had already drained my savings just to keep the site afloat. I decided to take a risk. I reached out to an investor I knew from a networking event I attended months earlier. I had no experience pitching, no solid track record, and no proof of concept beyond a few lines of code, but I asked for a meeting anyway. I poured my heart into explaining my vision, my frustrations, and my belief that my platform could disrupt the freelancing world. To my surprise, the investor was intrigued. He wasn't looking for a polished product, but for someone who was willing to work hard and had the passion to back it up. He agreed to give me a small seed investment in exchange for equity in the company. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get started. With that initial funding, I was able to bring in a few talented developers and designers to help build the platform into something more professional. We spent the next several months iterating, launching new features, and refining the user experience. Slowly, we started to gain traction. The platform wasn't perfect, but it was functional, and the user base began to grow. But just as things were starting to look up, disaster struck. A massive security breach. Hackers exploited a vulnerability in the site's code and gained access to user data. I remember waking up in the middle of the night to a series of frantic emails from users who had been affected. Panic set in. I couldn't afford to lose the trust of my users, and I knew this could be the end of the road for us. I spent the next few days and nights working with my team to fix the breach, notify affected users, and beef up our security measures. We issued refunds to clients whose work had been compromised and offered free credit to affected freelancers. It was a PR nightmare, but we managed to weather the storm. The aftermath of the breach was a tough pill to swallow, but it also taught me a critical lesson. When you're building something from scratch, you can't afford to ignore the fundamentals. Security, communication, and transparency became the pillars of our platform moving forward. The next phase of growth wasn't easy. We continued to face challenges in terms of scaling, customer acquisition, and the constant need to adapt to an ever-changing digital landscape. But we also had a dedicated user base that appreciated our commitment to providing a fair and transparent freelancing environment. By the time we hit our 3-year mark, things were starting to turn around. The platform was profitable, and we had gained a loyal following of both freelancers and clients. I'd gone from a solo developer coding in my apartment to managing a small team of employees. But I wasn't done yet. I knew that the real challenge lay ahead: scaling the business, expanding into new markets, and competing with the bigger, more established players in the freelancing world. Over the next few years, we focused on refining our platform, adding new features, and expanding our reach. We diversified our revenue streams by introducing subscription plans for freelancers, offering premium services to clients, and launching a marketplace for digital tools and resources. Slowly but surely, our platform gained more recognition, and we started to attract bigger clients and larger projects. Today, 5 years after that initial seed investment, our platform is one of the top contenders in the freelancing space. We have thousands of active users, a dedicated team, and a product that continues to evolve. It's been an incredibly difficult journey, full of failures, setbacks, and moments when I considered giving up. But looking back, I can honestly say that every challenge taught me something invaluable. To anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, it's not easy. There will be days when you question everything, when it feels like the world is against you. But if you have a vision and are willing to work tirelessly to bring it to life, anything is possible. You don't need to start with money, connections, or experience. You just need the drive to push through the hard times and keep moving forward. I'm living proof that if you're willing to take risks and learn from your failures, success is within reach. It was early 2017 when I found myself at a crossroads. I had just quit my job as a junior designer at a small advertising firm, hoping to take a shot at doing something bigger. But like many young entrepreneurs, I had no real idea what something bigger would be. I had no plan, no investors, and honestly, not much in the way of experience. What I did have was a tiny savings cushion of $500, a laptop, and a burning desire to create something of my own. At the time, I was pretty lost. I had no contacts in the business world, no real mentor to guide me, and I wasn't even sure what kind of business I wanted to start. I spent hours researching various industries, reading blogs, watching YouTube videos about entrepreneurship, and consuming as much content as possible. In all honesty, I was just trying to find something that could make me money without requiring massive upfront investment. After weeks of trial and error, I stumbled across dropshipping. For those who don't know, dropshipping is an e-commerce model where you sell products through an online store without holding any inventory yourself. You partner with a supplier who ships the product directly to your customer, and you act as the middleman. At first glance, it sounded like the perfect solution: low startup costs, a massive market, and a chance to work from home. I wasn't naive enough to think it would be easy. I knew the internet was full of people trying to sell all kinds of get-rich-quick schemes, and I didn't want to fall into that trap. So, I spent several more weeks learning the ins and outs of the dropshipping business. I studied Facebook ads, Shopify, and influencer marketing. I learned about product research and how to spot trending items. By the time I felt ready, I had spent all my $500 on a basic Shopify subscription, a website theme, and some minimal Facebook ad spend. My first product was a phone accessory I thought would be a hit, a fancy charging cable that had a glowing LED light when plugged in. I thought it looked cool, and it seemed like something people would want to buy. So, I set up my website, ran a few ads, and waited for the sales to roll in. Guess what? Nothing happened. My ads didn't convert. I didn't make a single sale. I felt like a complete failure, but I wasn't ready to give up. I went back to the drawing board and tried again. This time, I shifted my focus from flashy products to things people actually needed, stuff like portable phone chargers and wireless earbuds. I spent even more time perfecting my ad copy and tweaking my Facebook ads. Slowly, I started to see results. After a few months of experimenting, I had a handful of sales. They weren't huge numbers, but they were enough to make me realize this could work. I used the profits to reinvest in the business, upgrading my website, improving the customer experience, and scaling my ad campaigns. At first, I was working 12 to 14-hour days, constantly tweaking my ads, testing new products, and researching how to optimize every aspect of my business. I was learning by doing, which meant making a lot of mistakes along the way. But every mistake was a lesson that I applied to the next challenge. By the end of 2017, I had grown my dropshipping business to the point where I was bringing in around $10K a month in revenue. That might sound impressive, but it wasn't all profit. I had to pay for advertising, product costs, and various other expenses. Still, I was making enough money to quit my part-time job and focus entirely on my business. I took the plunge and went full-time, working from home with nothing but my laptop and a small team of virtual assistants. But just when I thought things were starting to stabilize, the unthinkable happened. Facebook banned my ads. I'll never forget the feeling of panic when I saw that notification. My entire business relied on Facebook ads to drive traffic to my store, and suddenly, I had no way to reach my customers. It was a huge blow. But instead of wallowing in despair, I took a deep breath and started thinking strategically. If Facebook ads weren't going to work anymore, I had to find another way to bring in traffic. I had heard a little about influencer marketing and decided to give it a try. I reached out to a few influencers in my niche and offered to send them free products in exchange for reviews and shoutouts on their social media accounts. Some said yes, and a few even agreed to do paid promotions. The results were beyond anything I expected. Sales skyrocketed. Suddenly, my business was thriving again. I had discovered a new avenue for growth. By mid-2018, I had scaled my business to $50K in revenue per month. It was a surreal feeling. I went from barely scraping by with a few sales to managing a full-fledged e-commerce brand that was making more money than I ever dreamed possible. But I didn't stop there. I continued to optimize my marketing, improve my products, and expand into new niches. I hired a small team to help with customer service, product sourcing, and social media management. At this point, my business was no longer just dropshipping. I started creating my own branded products, which helped increase customer loyalty and profit margins. I was no longer at the mercy of third-party suppliers who could drop me at any time. I had my own inventory, which allowed me to scale even further. In 2019, I transitioned from running a one-man show to having a full team of 10 people working for me. And by 2020, my business was generating over $500K a year. This was the result of years of trial and error, constant adaptation, and an unwavering commitment to learning from mistakes. Today, I still run my business, but it's not just about the money anymore. It's about the freedom and flexibility it provides. I can work from anywhere in the world, choose my own schedule, and have a level of control over my life that I never thought was possible. Looking back, I can honestly say that the hardest part of the journey wasn't starting the business. It was learning to navigate the constant challenges and setbacks. There were so many times I thought about quitting, but I'm grateful I didn't. I didn't start with a massive budget or years of experience. I didn't have the right connections or a mentor guiding me. All I had was the willingness to keep going, even when things seemed hopeless. And that, I think, is the most important lesson I learned. Persistence is the key to success. You don't need everything to be perfect, and you don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to start. And when you hit obstacles, and you will, you need to keep going, even when you feel like giving up. I know there are people reading this who are just starting out, and I want to tell you, it's okay to be scared. It's okay to fail. It's okay to not have all the answers. What matters is that you keep moving forward. If I can do it, anyone can. The road won't always be easy, but the rewards are worth it. If you have a vision and are willing to put in the work, your own success story is out there waiting for you. That's how I went from a broke designer with $500 to running a six-figure business. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. The journey continues. From broke to built, the journey of a struggling entrepreneur. About 6 years ago, I was in a dark place. I had just lost my job at a tech startup that I thought was going to be my big break. I had no money, no prospects, and no real sense of direction. I was in my mid-20s, living paycheck to paycheck, and barely scraping by. I had a few friends who had gotten into tech and were thriving, but I couldn't even afford to get into the game. I had always been interested in starting my own business, but I was constantly told that it wasn't realistic. It was too risky. It was too difficult. It was too much. But when I lost my job, I found myself staring down a choice. Keep drifting from one dead-end job to the next, or take a leap of faith and finally do something for myself. I chose the latter. At the time, I had very little capital. My savings were non-existent, and the only thing I had going for me was a decent amount of knowledge about the tech world. My friends and family thought I was crazy. I didn't blame them, honestly. I had no formal business experience, and most of the people around me were highly skeptical that I could pull it off. But I had a burning desire to prove them wrong. I decided to start a web design agency. Why web design? It felt like a low-entry barrier industry with a potential for steady income, and I had a background in basic design from my previous job. I figured it could be something I could bootstrap. All I needed was a computer, an internet connection, and a little hustle. The first few months were a blur. I was working long nights, often staying up until 3 or 4 a.m. trying to get everything together. The agency didn't really have clients, and I didn't know anyone who needed web design. I started by doing some small freelance gigs on Upwork, Fiverr, and other freelance platforms. I had no choice but to price myself super low just to get a few projects under my belt. It was frustrating. I remember working on a website for a local restaurant for $200, probably 50 hours of work for barely anything in return. But I needed the experience and, more importantly, I needed a portfolio. I spent my weekends going to small businesses in my area, knocking on doors, and offering my services. I was rejected more times than I care to count. But I learned how to handle rejection early on and developed a thick skin. After about 6 months, things started to pick up. I began getting more inquiries, and while many of the projects were still low budget, they gave me the chance to refine my skills. I kept working long hours, learning as much as I could, and slowly building a reputation for myself. Around that time, I made my first big breakthrough. One of my clients referred me to a medium-sized business that needed a complete website overhaul. This was a significant project, and I was able to charge a premium price for it. I had been pricing myself at ridiculously low rates to get my foot in the door, but I realized that I was capable of offering more value than I had initially believed. From there, I started positioning myself as an expert rather than just another freelancer. I doubled my prices, and even though I was scared out of my mind, it paid off. The new clients I started attracting were willing to pay for quality, and I had proven that I could deliver. As the business grew, I knew I couldn't do it alone. I began outsourcing certain tasks, like copywriting and SEO, to other freelancers. The extra help allowed me to focus on scaling the business, and slowly but surely, I started to build a team. Hiring the right people was another learning curve, and it took a while to figure out how to manage people, set expectations, and hold everyone accountable. But I was determined to make it work. Fast forward to today, and my web design agency has expanded into a full-service digital marketing company. We now offer everything from custom website design to SEO, PPC, and social media management. The team has grown from just me working out of my tiny apartment to 20 full-time employees working in an office space that we actually had to expand last year due to the influx of clients. Our revenue has increased exponentially, and we've been able to land some pretty impressive clients. But even with the success, I never forgot those early days. I still look at the businesses I work with through the lens of someone who struggled. I try to bring that empathy to my work, understanding the pressures of running a small business and the challenges they face. We've even started offering discounted services to struggling small businesses and startups as a way to give back. Looking back, I realized there were 3 key lessons that helped me succeed. 1. Persistence over perfection. In the beginning, I wasn't great. My designs weren't perfect, and my business operations were all over the place. But I kept pushing forward and learning from my mistakes. I knew that success wasn't going to happen overnight, and I was okay with that. It was the persistence that mattered most. 2. The power of networking. The turning point for my business came when I started seriously networking. I stopped treating clients like just transactional relationships and started to build long-term connections. Word of mouth from happy clients has been one of the most effective marketing strategies I've had. 3. Investing in myself and the business. When I had no money, I didn't spend it on fancy equipment or big marketing campaigns. I spent it on education. I took courses, read books, and attended webinars. Every dollar I made was reinvested into the business or into personal development. It was a tough choice at times, but I knew that without continued learning and growth, I wouldn't be able to scale. Today, I'm incredibly proud of what I've built. My family, who were once skeptical of my ambitions, now look at me with pride. My friends no longer think I'm crazy, and I've even been able to give back to the community in ways I never imagined. There are still days when I feel overwhelmed or unsure of the future, but I now have the confidence to handle whatever comes my way. What keeps me going is the constant reminder that success isn't linear, and every failure is a lesson that brings you one step closer to your goals. It's not about avoiding mistakes, but about learning from them and adapting. I know the road ahead will be filled with challenges, but I'm no longer afraid. In fact, I embrace them. To anyone who's reading this and feels like they're stuck or facing an uphill battle, you're not alone. It's easy to look at successful entrepreneurs and think they had it easy or that it just happened overnight. But I can tell you that every single one of us has struggled, failed, and learned the hard way. So keep pushing forward. It may not be easy, but it will be worth it. I always knew I had an entrepreneurial itch, but it wasn't until I was stuck in a cubicle job that I realized I had to scratch it or risk living a life full of what-ifs. This is the story of how I went from a burned-out employee in a soul-sucking corporate job to running a successful online business that changed my life. The road was far from smooth, but looking back, every bump and twist made the success feel sweeter. It all started when I graduated college. Like most of my peers, I was swept up in the idea that landing a corporate job with a solid salary and benefits was the dream. I had studied business management, so it felt like the natural path. I scored a job at a mid-level company, working in a marketing department. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and I was doing okay. Or so I thought. As the months passed, the excitement wore off, and the reality of corporate life set in. I sat in an open-plan office, working on projects that didn't excite me, answering to a boss who seemed to only care about the bottom line, and battling office politics with people who cared more about climbing the ladder than actual work. I'd work late hours, only to feel like I was just another cog in a machine that didn't recognize me as anything more than a number. The frustration grew. I had been telling myself that the job would get better, that it was just a phase. But deep down, I knew I was more than capable of doing something bigger. I started working on side projects in my free time, anything that would get me away from the monotony of my 9 to 5. I dabbled in freelance writing, experimented with photography, and tried a few online ventures, but nothing stuck. The fear of failure loomed large, and I'd back off every time something didn't work out. One day, while scrolling through Reddit, I came across a post about people making money through e-commerce, specifically by selling products through Amazon's FBA Fulfillment by Amazon program. The idea was simple enough. Buy products in bulk, send them to Amazon's warehouse, and let Amazon handle the sales, shipping, and customer service. It sounded like the perfect business model for someone who wanted to start something on the side without needing a huge upfront investment. I couldn't shake the idea. It seemed like a low-risk, high-reward opportunity, so I decided to take the plunge. I spent hours researching, reading case studies, and watching YouTube videos on how to source products and set up an Amazon storefront. My initial investment was minimal, just a few $100s to buy inventory and set up a basic online store. But it was enough to spark something inside me. The first few months were tough. I made rookie mistakes, underpricing my products, overestimating demand, and even sending shipments to Amazon that got delayed. But with each failure, I learned something valuable. I improved my marketing strategies, honed my ability to identify profitable products, and got better at managing my inventory. Slowly but surely, sales started to trickle in. Then, something clicked. I found a niche product that sold surprisingly well. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was something that had consistent demand, low competition, and a decent profit margin. I poured all my energy into scaling this product, optimizing my listings, and making my store more professional. The sales grew, and with each passing month, I saw the potential of what I had built. By the end of my first year running the store, I had replaced my corporate salary. It wasn't much at first, but it was enough to make me realize that I could do this full-time. I took a leap of faith, quit my job, and dove headfirst into my business. It was terrifying. There was no safety net, no guaranteed paycheck, but the idea of being my own boss and creating something from nothing was intoxicating. The next few years were a whirlwind. I expanded my product range, tested new marketing strategies, and optimized my supply chain. I was working harder than I had ever worked before, but it was on my terms. I didn't mind the long hours because I knew I was building something that could sustain me and my family. But with success came new challenges. The more money I made, the more I had to deal with. I had to learn how to manage taxes, hire employees, and navigate the complexities of running a full-fledged business. I struggled with managing cash flow in the early days, making the mistake of reinvesting too much into inventory without accounting for the slow periods in sales. At one point, I nearly ran out of cash because I had ordered too much stock and sales were slower than expected. It was a wake-up call that forced me to rethink how I managed my business finances. Despite these challenges, the business continued to grow. My income doubled, then tripled, as I reinvested profits into new products, better marketing, and more efficient logistics. Eventually, I reached a point where I was no longer working on the business every day. I had built a team of virtual assistants, warehouse staff, and contractors who handled everything from order fulfillment to customer service. I was able to focus on scaling the business even further, exploring new opportunities, and spending more time with my family. Today, I run a successful e-commerce business that generates millions in revenue every year. I've been able to travel the world, buy my dream home, and live a life I never thought was possible when I was stuck in that cubicle. But the road wasn't easy. There were sleepless nights, countless mistakes, and moments where I doubted myself. But I learned that every failure was just a stepping stone toward success. Looking back, I realized that the key to my success wasn't any one big breakthrough. It was the cumulative effect of countless small decisions, choosing to start, learning from my mistakes, and never giving up even when it seemed like things weren't going to work out. Entrepreneurship isn't about avoiding failure. It's about learning to embrace it and use it as fuel for growth. If you're reading this and wondering if you should take the leap into entrepreneurship, my advice is simple: do it. Start small, stay persistent, and keep learning. There will be moments where you question whether it's all worth it, but if you keep pushing through the tough times, you'll look back and realize that every struggle was part of the journey. And if you fail, well, failure is just another lesson on the road to success. Keep going. I've spent the past 10 years trying to build something from the ground up. It all started with a dream, a really vague one, but a dream nonetheless. At the time, I was fresh out of college with a degree in business administration. My classmates and I were told over and over again to find our path, follow our passion, and create something that could change the world. That sounded great, but the truth was, I had no clue what that would look like for me. I didn't have a grand idea for an app or a revolutionary product. I didn't even have a particular industry that I was obsessed with. I guess you could say I started with a broad question. How can I make money? My first attempt at entrepreneurship wasn't some groundbreaking tech startup or fancy app. It was a tiny online store that sold custom-made t-shirts. Simple, right? I'd seen people on YouTube and in forums saying that this was a quick way to make cash. You design some cool graphics, print them on shirts, and bam, you're an entrepreneur. So, I went ahead and created a website, slapped on a couple of designs I thought were edgy, and began marketing it on social media. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. For the first few months, I barely made any sales. The t-shirts were decent, but they weren't anything special. They were generic designs, and I didn't have the budget to spend on advertising. Even when I did advertise, I had no idea who my target audience was. I thought everyone would like my designs, but it turns out they didn't. The store had a few visitors, but most just clicked off without buying anything. I spent more money on Facebook ads than I made in profit. To top it all off, I had zero customer service skills, and shipping times were horrible. It was a disaster, and I eventually closed the store after 6 months, frustrated and broke. I took a step back and thought about why it failed. Was it the product? The marketing? Was I just not cut out for this? I had to dig deeper, so I did some research, read a ton of books, watched YouTube videos, and even took a few online courses. One thing I learned quickly was that building a business required a lot more than just having a product. You needed to have a niche, a target market, and, most importantly, something that set you apart from everyone else. I realized my designs weren't original enough, and I wasn't tapping into a specific audience's needs or interests. Instead of getting discouraged, I started brainstorming. This time, I decided to focus on something that I knew a lot about: gaming. I had been a gamer since I was 12, and I spent hours upon hours playing everything from first-person shooters to role-playing games. I figured, if I know the community and I know what they like, maybe I can build a store around that. So, I pivoted. I started designing gaming-related merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, and even posters featuring quotes, characters, and memes from popular games. I made sure everything I sold was unique, and I built a brand around the idea of creating custom items for gamers. I even reached out to streamers and influencers within the gaming community and offered to send them free merchandise in exchange for promoting it. Slowly, things started to pick up. More people visited the store, and my designs resonated with the audience. I finally got a few sales, and those few sales turned into a steady trickle of income. But the road to success wasn't easy. As my store started to gain traction, I realized I needed to level up my game. I hired a graphic designer to improve the quality of my designs, and I focused on creating better user experiences for my customers. I also learned about the importance of building an email list and engaging with my customers through social media. It was all about creating a community, not just selling products. Over time, my revenue grew, and I was able to hire more people to help with operations, marketing, and customer service. After about 2 years of hustling, I turned a modest profit, and I was finally able to quit my day job. But even then, I was still juggling a million different things: sourcing materials, handling customer inquiries, shipping orders, and keeping up with the competition. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I had to keep pushing forward. I made sure my business stayed lean, but I didn't skimp on customer service. The gaming community is fiercely loyal, and I made sure to treat every customer like they were my top priority. I took risks, but I also learned to be patient. Every time I hit a setback, I reminded myself that growth isn't always linear. There were months where sales tanked, and I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But I kept going. Eventually, I reached the point where I had a fully functioning operation. I had employees, a warehouse, and a solid product lineup. The business was finally stable, and I was making enough money to be comfortable. But there was one problem: I wasn't happy. I had achieved what I set out to do, build a successful business, but I had also burned myself out. The constant pressure to grow, compete, and stay ahead of the curve took its toll. I felt disconnected from the very community I had worked so hard to serve. I found myself thinking about selling the business, moving on, and maybe even starting something new. I had made it to the top, but at what cost? That's when I realized something important. Entrepreneurship isn't just about building a successful business. It's about finding balance, understanding your priorities, and knowing when to take a step back. I decided to sell the business. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right decision for my mental health and my happiness. I found a buyer who shared the same passion for the gaming community, and I sold the store for a fair price. Today, I'm in a completely different place. I'm still involved in the entrepreneurial world, but I've shifted my focus to consulting and mentoring. I've learned that success is not just about making money. It's about finding fulfillment in what you do. For me, that means helping others achieve their entrepreneurial dreams without burning out in the process. If there's one thing I wish I could tell aspiring entrepreneurs, it's this. The journey will be tough. You'll fail. You'll question your decisions. You'll burn out. But don't let that stop you. Keep going and remember that success isn't always measured by how much money you make. It's measured by how happy you are with the life you've built. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I had always considered myself a creative person. Ever since I was a kid, I loved to draw, write stories, and make things out of random materials I could find. But somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that creativity alone wouldn't cut it in the real world. I grew up in a pretty traditional family, one where getting a steady job with a decent paycheck was the ultimate goal. So, I followed the path that everyone expected. I went to college, got my degree in business, and started working for a corporate firm right after graduation. I was never really passionate about the corporate grind. It wasn't the 9-to-5 routine or the office politics that bothered me. I could handle that. It was the fact that I spent every day working on someone else's vision. I spent months, years even, helping companies increase their profits, all the while feeling a little emptier with each passing day. I had a good salary, great benefits, and a steady career path ahead of me. But it just didn't feel right. The creative side of me, the side that used to get excited about making something unique, was suffocating. I spent a good portion of my early 20s in a sort of existential crisis, trying to figure out what I really wanted to do. I knew I loved creating things, but I also knew I didn't want to quit my job without any backup plan. At one point, I got so frustrated that I quit my corporate job on a whim. I had no savings, no backup plan, and no clear direction. Looking back, it was probably one of the most reckless decisions I've ever made, but I don't regret it. It forced me to take a hard look at what I truly wanted in life. I started working on small freelance projects here and there, anything that let me use my creative skills. I did some graphic design, web development, and even some content writing. I learned as I went along, mostly by trial and error. I started getting the hang of how to market myself online, how to land clients, and how to negotiate contracts. But despite all my hustle, I was barely making enough to cover my rent. I wasn't living lavishly by any means. One day, a client who had been one of my regulars asked me if I could create a logo for his new startup. He was a former corporate guy like me and was finally venturing into his own business. At first, I thought nothing of it, but then I remembered something. The startup world was everywhere. It was exploding with new ideas, new tech, new ways of doing things. I'd always dreamed of building my own business, but I had never thought of using my design skills as a way to enter that world. That logo became the turning point. Not only did he love it, but he was so impressed with my work that he recommended me to several of his connections. Slowly but surely, I started to build up a client base. My freelance design business began to take off. It wasn't glamorous, but I was able to support myself, and I had the flexibility to work on my terms. It felt like I was finally taking control of my life. However, as the months passed, I realized something. I had more potential than just designing logos for other people. I had this vision of creating my own brand, one that could offer more than just visual aesthetics. I wanted to combine my love for design with a deeper mission. I wanted to create something that people would care about, but I still wasn't sure what that something was. That's when I got an idea, something that combined my background in business, my creative skills, and my desire to make an impact. I had been following the rise of eco-friendly products, and I noticed that a lot of brands were focusing on sustainability but lacked strong design. They had great ideas, but their branding was either too generic or just didn't stand out. At the same time, I had been seeing more and more people who were starting to care about sustainability, but there weren't enough affordable, stylish options available. The idea for my brand came in a flash. I would create eco-friendly, stylish products that had great design. My initial concept was simple, sustainable fashion. I would create a line of everyday wear, accessories, and home goods made from recycled or sustainable materials. I also wanted to make sure that the designs were modern, minimalist, and functional. I didn't want my products to scream eco-friendly. I wanted them to speak for themselves. I didn't have a lot of money to get started, but I did have my design background and the network I'd built from my freelance work. I started by sketching designs, sourcing materials, and connecting with manufacturers who could produce the products at a reasonable cost. I focused on creating a small initial collection, just enough to start selling online. I also worked on building my brand from the ground up: the logo, the website, the messaging, the social media presence. At first, I didn't know if anyone would care. My friends and family were supportive, but I was unsure if the larger world would even notice my little brand. I launched my website, started posting on Instagram, and reached out to influencers who shared my values. Slowly, things began to pick up. People were buying the products, sharing their photos, and tagging my brand. Word of mouth was working. I was getting reviews and feedback from real customers, not just family and friends. My little startup was slowly turning into something real. But it wasn't smooth sailing from the beginning. As I scaled up, I encountered all the typical problems that come with running a business: cash flow issues, supply chain delays, unhappy customers, and the never-ending battle to stand out in a saturated market. There were months where I questioned whether I should just go back to freelancing. But every time I thought about quitting, I'd remind myself that I was building something bigger than just a business. I was building a brand with a purpose, something that could make a difference in the world. In the end, my persistence paid off. After a few years of constant growth, learning from mistakes, and adjusting my strategies, my brand became a recognized name in the eco-friendly fashion world. I was able to hire a team, expand my product line, and even launch a few pop-up stores in major cities. I look back now and realize that the decision to quit my corporate job, despite how risky it seemed, was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Building a business from scratch is never easy, but it has been the most rewarding thing I've ever done. I didn't start with a clear blueprint, and I definitely didn't have everything figured out. But with a little creativity, a lot of hard work, and a willingness to fail and learn from it, I was able to turn my dreams into reality. So, if you're reading this and wondering if you should take the plunge into entrepreneurship, my advice is simple: don't wait for everything to be perfect. Just start. You'll learn along the way, and you'll be amazed at what you can achieve. It's not always about having the perfect idea from the beginning. It's about taking that first step and letting the journey unfold. I'm proud of what I've built, but I'm even more excited about where this journey will take me next. The best part is, I'm no longer just building a business, I'm building a legacy. I'll never forget the first day I started my company. It wasn't glamorous, and to be honest, I didn't think it would succeed at all. I had an idea, a lot of passion, and zero experience. At that point, I was just like a lot of other people, stuck in a 9-to-5 job, hating my life, but not doing anything to change it. Before I got into business, I was working as an administrative assistant for a small real estate company in my hometown. The work was unremarkable. My day consisted of answering phone calls, handling paperwork, and setting up appointments. Nothing thrilling or challenging. I knew I was capable of more, but I was trapped in the comfort of a predictable paycheck. I'd always had ideas for business, though. I'd daydream about opening a bakery, starting an online clothing shop, or creating a tech company. The problem was, I didn't have any skills in any of those areas, and the thought of losing my steady income scared the hell out of me. One night, I was talking to a friend over beers, and he told me about an e-commerce business that he started on the side. It was selling custom phone cases on Etsy. He was doing pretty well and had scaled it up over a couple of years. I was intrigued but also felt intimidated. I knew nothing about online selling, but it sparked something inside me. I spent the next few weeks researching and reading everything I could find about dropshipping, e-commerce platforms, and marketing strategies. Then it hit me. What if I could start a business, but one that wasn't tied to inventory or heavy upfront costs? Dropshipping seemed like a perfect fit. I could sell products online without ever touching them, which meant no big investments and minimal risk. So, with no prior experience, I dove headfirst into this world. I spent countless hours learning about Shopify, setting up my website, finding suppliers, and experimenting with different niches. I eventually landed on custom-printed t-shirts. It seemed like something that had potential, and I knew I could market it well because I was passionate about graphic design, even though I had never done it professionally. At first, things were a mess. I spent days trying to create the perfect logo, setting up my store, and tweaking the website's design. But every time I thought I was getting closer to launching, I'd find something new to obsess over. The payment system wasn't right, the website design looked off, or I didn't feel confident in the quality of my product images. I second-guessed myself constantly, but after weeks of preparation, I finally hit publish and launched my store. Then came the terrifying part. I had a website, but no one was visiting it. I had no audience. I posted on social media, but I had 0 followers. I tried Google Ads, but my budget quickly ran out without any sales. I felt like I had just thrown money down the drain. But I didn't give up. I kept researching and trying new things. Slowly, I began to learn about how to use Instagram to drive traffic. I created influencer outreach campaigns, offering free shirts in exchange for posts on their pages. I worked tirelessly to create content that would engage my target audience, and I used Instagram ads to push my brand further. I also reached out to micro-influencers who were willing to promote my shirts for a much lower cost than larger accounts. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Then, one day, I got my first sale. It was a simple order for a shirt that said, "Coffee and Kindness." It wasn't a huge order, but to me, it felt like a validation that all my work wasn't for nothing. I couldn't believe someone had bought something I made. It was the boost I needed to keep going. After that, the sales started trickling in. Not fast, but steadily. I was working full-time at my day job, but my nights were spent designing shirts, responding to customers, managing inventory, even though I didn't physically have any, and shipping out orders. It was exhausting. Some nights, I would only get 3 hours of sleep before having to get up for work, but I kept pushing through because I knew this was my chance to escape the soul-sucking 9 to 5 grind. A few months in, I was able to quit my job. The business wasn't making me rich, but it was making enough to pay my bills, and that was all I needed. I took the plunge and decided to go all in on my business. That's when the real challenges began. I had to figure out how to scale. I couldn't do everything on my own anymore. I hired a few part-time employees to help with packing and shipping. I started outsourcing my design work so I could focus on growing the business. Slowly but surely, things started to pick up. I learned how to use Facebook and Instagram ads more effectively, and I began working with influencers who had large followings. Sales skyrocketed. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. I now own a full-fledged e-commerce business, and it generates a steady income. I've grown my brand to include a range of products, from t-shirts to hoodies, mugs, and posters. It's not a billion-dollar company, but it's mine, and that's worth more than I ever could have imagined. I've learned a lot over the past few years, how to manage my time, how to deal with failures, and how to constantly innovate. But more than anything, I've learned how to keep going even when things look hopeless. There were days when I thought about giving up, when the bills were piling up, when customers complained, when it seemed like the whole business was falling apart. But I never did give up. One thing I've come to understand is that entrepreneurship isn't a straight line. It's messy. It's filled with mistakes, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But it's also incredibly rewarding. It's not about overnight success, it's about perseverance and willingness to fail forward. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm getting closer every day. And I wouldn't trade this journey for anything. So, if you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: just start. Don't wait for the perfect time or the perfect plan. Get your hands dirty, learn as you go, and keep pushing even when it gets tough. There's no roadmap, but that's the beauty of it. If you're committed, you can make it work. If I can go from a nobody in a dead-end job to running a profitable business, so can you. It's not easy, but nothing worth having ever is. This is the story of how I built my tech company from the ground up, starting with nothing but an idea and a laptop. I was 23, living in a one-bedroom apartment, working part-time at a coffee shop, and juggling freelance web development gigs. I had no trust fund, no connections, and no fancy business degree. All I had was a burning passion to create something that could change people's lives. It all began when I realized there was a massive gap in the way small businesses approached online marketing. They were all stuck using clunky, outdated tools that didn't really speak to the modern consumer. As I worked with clients, I saw them struggle to get good results with the old platforms. It was clear that the market needed something new, something smarter, and most importantly, something simpler. I wanted to build a tool that could give small business owners everything they needed to build their brand online without the headache. But, as any entrepreneur knows, the path to building something meaningful is never as easy as it seems. I had zero capital, and the tech landscape was intimidating. There were plenty of other startups out there already, and the competition was fierce. In the beginning, I wasn't thinking about scaling or raising money. I just needed to prove the idea. So, I began working on a basic version of the platform in my free time. I didn't have the luxury of hiring developers, so I was doing everything myself, coding the front end, working on back-end server infrastructure, designing the user interface, and yes, even debugging my own code at 3 a.m. I lived off ramen noodles and coffee for months. I was lucky to have a few friends who believed in me and offered moral support. But to be honest, my social life went out the window. I had no time for anything other than my project. My friends would invite me to hang out, but I'd decline, telling them I had too much work to do. Sometimes, it felt like I was building this company for nobody but myself. There were days when I wanted to give up because the project seemed too ambitious, but something kept me going. Around month 3, I realized that I needed to test the platform. I wasn't going to just launch it blindly and hope it worked. So, I reached out to local small business owners who might benefit from the tool. I started with a small group of local coffee shops, boutique stores, and freelance professionals. I told them about my project, explained that it was a work in progress, and offered them a chance to use it for free in exchange for feedback. To my surprise, several business owners took a chance on me. I'd show up at their shops, sit down with them, and walk them through the platform, offering them real-time support. They seemed to appreciate the effort, and over time, I began to refine the tool based on their feedback. About 6 months in, I felt ready to officially launch my product. I had built a functional platform that allowed small businesses to manage their social media accounts, run targeted ad campaigns, track their analytics, and more, all in one place. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. I knew that the first version of the product was just a stepping stone. The real value would come once I started iterating and improving based on user feedback. I created a simple landing page, wrote up a few blog posts, and shared my product on every tech forum and social media group I could find. The response was slow at first. I didn't have the budget to pay for ads, so I relied entirely on organic reach. I learned about SEO, content marketing, and community building. Slowly, I started gaining traction. A few more businesses signed up, and they brought in their friends. Word of mouth started spreading. After about a year of hard work, I had a small but loyal customer base. I still hadn't made any serious money. I was living off savings and whatever side gigs I could find. But the success wasn't about money at that point. It was about validation. I had proof that the tool worked, that people were willing to pay for it, and that I was onto something. That was when I hit a roadblock. I realized that my product could only grow so much without additional funding. As much as I hated the idea of going into debt or diluting my ownership by raising capital, I knew that if I wanted to scale the business, I'd need outside help. So, I did something that terrified me. I started reaching out to investors. I spent countless hours crafting my pitch, making sure I could explain not just the product but the vision behind it. I attended startup networking events and demo days, pitched to anyone who would listen, and got rejected more times than I care to admit. It was brutal. At one point, I felt like I was just spinning my wheels. Then, one afternoon, I got an email from an angel investor who had been following my journey. He had seen my blog posts, my interviews, and the growth of the product. He liked the direction I was heading and wanted to have a conversation. Long story short, we ended up agreeing on a deal. I was able to raise enough money to hire my first full-time employee, someone to handle customer support, so I could focus on scaling the product. With the investment came a wave of responsibility. I was now accountable to investors, employees, and customers in a way I hadn't been before. My role shifted from being the guy who built the product to being the CEO of a growing company. There were new challenges, from managing a team to negotiating partnerships. And the pressure was real. Every decision I made felt like it could make or break the company. But the real turning point came when I landed a deal with a well-known e-commerce platform. They had been using my tool for a few months and saw the potential to integrate it into their platform for their clients. This partnership catapulted the business to the next level. It gave us visibility, increased our user base, and proved that we weren't just a flash-in-the-pan startup. Fast forward another 2 years, and my company is now a leader in its niche. We've raised a Series A round, expanded our team to 50 employees, and onboard hundreds of small businesses worldwide. Our platform has evolved, offering advanced features like AI-driven marketing automation and predictive analytics. And we're now helping businesses grow in ways I could have never imagined when I was coding alone in my apartment. Looking back, the journey was a combination of persistence, luck, and timing. The lessons I've learned along the way are invaluable. The most important one? That success rarely comes overnight. It's the product of long hours, countless failures, and a refusal to give up. And to anyone reading this, thinking about starting their own business, if you believe in your idea and are willing to put in the work, don't let fear hold you back. You can do it too. It won't be easy, but it'll be worth it. I promise. I grew up in a small town where the biggest ambition most people had was to work at the local factory or in one of the two grocery stores. As a kid, I always had bigger dreams. I was fascinated by the world beyond my hometown, a world where success wasn't handed down by birthright or limited to the same old routine. Instead, I was obsessed with the idea of building something from nothing. It started when I was about 14. I remember being at the town's library when I stumbled upon a book about starting a business. At first, I just thought it was some fluff about how to open a small shop. But as I flipped through it, I started reading about the tech world, about people who made millions from nothing, about entrepreneurs who took risks and changed entire industries. That was the moment it clicked for me. I didn't want to just work for a living. I wanted to build something that would last. I didn't come from a wealthy family. My parents were hard workers, but money was always tight. I started my first business when I was 15, cutting lawns in the neighborhood. It wasn't much, but I learned the value of hard work, managing clients, and showing up on time. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I used the money I made to buy a used laptop and began teaching myself how to build websites. I knew that the internet was the future, and I wanted to be a part of it. By the time I was 18, I'd saved up enough money to rent a small office space in town. It wasn't much, just a single room with a desk, an old chair, and a computer, but I was ready to get started. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew that if I worked hard enough, I could make something happen. I spent months building a website that offered simple digital services, website design, logo creation, and social media management for small businesses in my town. It was a slow start, and most of the businesses in the area didn't understand the value of having an online presence. I had a lot of rejection, but I didn't give up. One day, a local restaurant owner asked me if I could build them a website. It was a small contract, but it was a breakthrough. I built the website, and it turned out well. The restaurant owner was thrilled and referred me to several other business owners. It snowballed from there. By the time I was 22, I had a small team working with me, and we were building websites for clients all across the state. But then, the crash happened. The market tanked, and businesses everywhere were tightening their belts. Suddenly, I was left with a bunch of contracts that were either delayed or canceled outright. The money dried up, and I had to make some tough decisions. I considered giving up. I thought about finding a stable job and leaving the business behind, but something kept pulling me back. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the brink of something big. After some soul-searching, I decided to pivot. I realized that instead of just building websites, I needed to think bigger. I started focusing on what my clients really needed, not just a website, but a comprehensive online strategy that included marketing, search engine optimization, SEO, and content creation. I learned everything I could about digital marketing, even taking online courses late at night. I worked around the clock, rebuilding my business from the ground up. It wasn't easy. At first, the new business model didn't attract much attention, but I kept pushing forward, and slowly, word of mouth started to spread. I took on clients who were looking for more than just a website. They wanted results. I built relationships, not just with clients, but with influencers and experts in the digital marketing world. By 24, I had a full-fledged marketing agency. My team and I were helping clients increase their online presence, generate leads, and grow their businesses. We had clients from all over the country, and our reputation began to grow. But success wasn't just handed to me. There were moments of doubt and failure, times when I thought the whole thing would fall apart. There were sleepless nights when I wondered if it was all worth it. I had to let go of clients who weren't a good fit, fire employees who weren't pulling their weight, and deal with the stress of cash flow issues. But through it all, I learned that persistence and adaptability were key. One of the biggest turning points came when I was introduced to a tech startup looking for a marketing team. It was a risk, This company had no established brand and no clear customer base, but they had a great product. They needed help launching their product to the world, and they were willing to trust me with it. We worked tirelessly for months, crafting a marketing strategy that included everything from social media ads to email marketing campaigns to influencer partnerships. When the product launched, it was a massive success. The company's revenue skyrocketed, and so did my agency's reputation. That's when everything changed. From that point forward, we became known for helping startups grow and scale. Our team grew rapidly, and we took on clients from all over the world. I moved from a small office in my hometown to a bigger space in the city. I started hiring top talent, building a team of experts who shared my vision. The business became more than just a job, it became a passion. I was living my dream, but it wasn't without its challenges. Even now, years later, the lessons I learned in those early days still guide me. I've made mistakes, lost clients, and had to navigate through a constantly changing industry. But I've also experienced incredible successes. I've had the privilege of watching my clients' businesses grow, seeing my team thrive, and building a company that I'm proud of. I've built something from nothing, and it's one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. Looking back, I realized that the road to entrepreneurship isn't a straight line. It's full of twists, turns, and bumps along the way. But it's also filled with opportunities to learn, grow, and build something that can change the world. If I had listened to the doubters or let fear hold me back, I wouldn't be where I am today. The key to success, for me, has always been to keep moving forward, even when it seems impossible. This is the story of how I went from a broke 20-year-old with no idea what I was doing to building a six-figure business that gave me the freedom to travel the world. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't fast, but every step along the way was worth it. I hope this inspires someone out there who feels stuck or uncertain. Here's my journey. I grew up in a small town, and to be honest, my family wasn't well off. My parents worked hard, but money was always tight. I went to a state school on a scholarship, studying business administration, thinking I'd get a job, work for 40 years, and retire with a nice pension. The usual dream, right? But somewhere along the way, I realized that dream wasn't for me. I wanted more. I didn't want to punch a clock and sit behind a desk for the rest of my life. The question was, how? I had zero clue about entrepreneurship. To be honest, I wasn't even sure how people started their own businesses. I had no experience, no mentors, and no real connections in the business world. But I knew one thing. I wanted to be my own boss. So, I started reading everything I could get my hands on. I read books, watched videos, and followed entrepreneurs on social media. I consumed information like it was my job. I learned about marketing, sales funnels, customer acquisition. Basically, I became obsessed. After a year of studying, I felt like I was ready to take the plunge. I had saved up a small amount of money working part-time jobs in college, but it wasn't nearly enough to start anything substantial. So, I had to get creative. I decided to start with something small, dropshipping. Looking back, dropshipping was the worst idea ever. It was a crowded market, full of scams and bad advice. But I didn't know that at the time. I spent a few $100 on setting up a website and marketing on Instagram and Facebook. I had no idea what I was doing with ads, so I burned through the small budget quickly. I made a couple of sales, but they were so few and far between that it wasn't even close to making a profit. After 6 months of grinding and losing money, I gave up on the idea. I was crushed, but I didn't let myself quit. Instead, I shifted gears and started looking into freelance work. I had learned a ton about digital marketing during my dropshipping experiment, so I thought, why not offer my services to small businesses who need help with their online presence? It wasn't glamorous, but I figured it was a solid way to make money while I figured out what I truly wanted to do. I created a simple website and put together a portfolio using projects I had worked on for my dropshipping store. I reached out to local businesses and offered to help with their social media marketing and online ads for a low rate. It was the best decision I made at the time. It wasn't much, but I started to get clients. Slowly, but surely, I built a network of small businesses that trusted me to help them grow their online presence. The first few months were tough. I had to work long hours to get the results, but I was learning on the fly. I started reading more books about marketing, attended online webinars, and joined Facebook groups where I could ask questions and get feedback from other entrepreneurs. Eventually, I started getting some decent results from my clients, and word of mouth spread. At the same time, I realized I needed to focus more on one thing, so I narrowed down my services to just Facebook and Instagram ads. It was a decision that changed everything. I became known as the guy who could make ads that actually worked, and more businesses started reaching out to me. I increased my rates, which scared me at first, but it paid off. People were willing to pay for expertise. After a year of freelancing, I was making more money than I ever thought possible. But I also realized something. I had built a job for myself, not a business. I was still trading time for money, and if I wanted to scale and grow, I needed to change that. I started building systems, hiring contractors, and outsourcing tasks that I didn't need to do myself. It wasn't easy to give up control, but it was necessary. In the following year, I hired a small team of virtual assistants to help with client management, design work, and reporting. I started using project management tools and automating tasks as much as possible. This was when my business truly began to grow. As my income started to rise, I realized that I didn't need to be physically tied to one place to run my business. I had worked from home for over a year, and while it was nice, I craved a change of scenery. So, I did something crazy. I booked a one-way ticket to Thailand. I told my clients that I'd be working from abroad for a few months, but they didn't bat an eye. By then, I had systems in place, and everything was running smoothly. I continued to work while exploring new countries and cultures, learning from other digital nomads, and growing my business. During my travels, I realized that my business could be more than just Facebook ads. I started experimenting with other services, like email marketing, content marketing, and even building full-scale marketing strategies for clients. I started charging higher fees for these premium services, and it attracted bigger clients. I went from working with small local businesses to partnering with mid-sized companies and even some startups. At this point, I had built a six-figure business that allowed me to work from anywhere. I was no longer worried about money or bills. I had the freedom to travel, learn, and live life on my own terms. But looking back, it wasn't luck. It was a series of decisions, actions, and perseverance. There were a lot of sleepless nights, countless rejections, and moments where I thought about quitting. But I kept going. Today, I run a fully remote digital marketing agency with a team of 15 people. I work with clients from all over the world and have learned so much from the journey. I've seen firsthand how hard work, persistence, and a willingness to learn can turn your life around. If I can do it, so can you. So, if you're reading this and you feel stuck or unsure of your next move, my advice is simple. Start. Learn as much as you can, be willing to fail, and take action. You never know where it might take you. If you're just starting out, don't focus on what everyone else is doing or trying to do something fancy. Focus on building something that works. And when it gets tough, and it will, just keep pushing forward. The payoff is worth it. I'm a 28-year-old entrepreneur, and my journey to success has been nothing short of a roller coaster ride. It all started when I was in college. I was your average student, never too focused on studies, always hustling on the side. I had this strange urge to make money, but at the same time, I had no idea how to go about it. I didn't want to be stuck in a 9-to-5 job, working for someone else. That thought alone made me anxious, and so the idea of entrepreneurship grew inside me, though I didn't know where to begin. It was during my sophomore year when I discovered the world of e-commerce. I had a friend who was selling products online and making a decent amount of money. One night, I decided to research e-commerce, learning about dropshipping, Amazon FBA, and Shopify stores. I became obsessed. I bought courses, watched YouTube tutorials, and spent sleepless nights studying what worked and what didn't. I was convinced that if I just found the right product, I could turn my life around. I decided to give it a shot. I scraped together $1,500 from my savings, which was the last bit of money I had after paying for tuition and rent. I invested in a website, a small Facebook ad budget, and a product that I thought had potential. The product was a phone case with an LED light on it, something quirky and fun that I thought could catch on. I was naive, thinking I could just slap some ads up and watch the sales roll in. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. I launched my store and sat back, expecting the orders to flood in. Instead, I barely made any sales. My ads weren't converting, and my website looked cheap. My $1,500 was gone in a matter of weeks, and I was left with a handful of useless phone cases and a growing sense of failure. I was discouraged but not defeated. I thought maybe I had chosen the wrong product, so I pivoted and tried selling different items, fidget spinners, LED lights, custom mugs, you name it. The pattern continued. I would spend money on ads, make some small sales, and then run out of cash. I got to the point where I was borrowing money from friends and family just to keep trying. Every time I failed, I told myself, this is the last time. I'll give up after this. But then I'd come across a new YouTube video or read a new blog post that reignited my hope. So I kept pushing forward. I eventually found a niche that worked. I had been researching fitness products, and I came across a resistance band that I thought could do well. This time, I was smarter. I worked on improving my website, learning how to create better product descriptions, and optimizing my ads. I also started to look into customer service, realizing that my lack of communication with customers had been one of my biggest mistakes. Slowly but surely, my efforts started paying off. I began to see a trickle of sales, and that trickle turned into a steady flow. Within 6 months, my Shopify store was generating $10,000 a month in revenue. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for me to quit my part-time job and focus full-time on my business. The first few months of being a full-time entrepreneur were nerve-wracking. I had no steady paycheck, no safety net. It was just me, my laptop, and a dream. I spent countless hours working on my business, researching new products, optimizing my website, and running ads. I also started to build a small team, an assistant to help with customer service, a graphic designer to create better ads, and a social media manager to grow my online presence. Things were finally starting to click. One of the turning points for me was when I decided to take my business to the next level by expanding into Amazon FBA. I had heard horror stories about the competition and the fees, but I figured if I could make it work, it would give my business the scalability I was looking for. I sourced a new product, a fitness tracker, and set up an Amazon FBA account. After a couple of months of trial and error, I had my first successful product on Amazon, and it started selling like hotcakes. With Amazon, the real challenge wasn't just about getting your product noticed, it was about standing out in a sea of similar products. I learned how to optimize my listings with better keywords, high-quality photos, and compelling descriptions. I also started to focus more on building a brand rather than just selling random products. My company's story became more than just a business, it became a community. I started engaging with customers on social media, creating valuable content, and running giveaways. Slowly but surely, my brand grew. By the end of year 2, I had reached $100,000 in annual revenue, and I was finally starting to see the results of my hard work. I took a portion of the profits and reinvested it back into the business, hiring more staff, developing new products, and running more targeted ads. I also began to scale my operations, hiring a warehouse team to handle inventory, shipping, and returns. But success wasn't as easy as it seemed. Along the way, I faced challenges that almost made me give up. There were days when I wanted to throw in the towel, when suppliers delayed shipments, when Facebook ads stopped working, and when I faced negative reviews from customers. There were also moments of self-doubt, wondering if I was doing the right thing or if I was just chasing a pipe dream. During these times, I leaned heavily on my network of fellow entrepreneurs, people I met through online forums, mastermind groups, and local meetups. They kept me going, offering advice, encouragement, and support when I felt like quitting. Now, at 28, my business is generating over $1 million in annual revenue. I've built a small but passionate team, and I've learned so much along the way, but I still don't feel like I've made it. I know the business landscape is always changing, and I have to stay on top of trends, keep innovating, and continue adapting. Entrepreneurship is not a destination, it's a journey, one that's full of failures, successes, and everything in between. Looking back, I realized that my biggest mistake was not quitting after the first or second failure. I could have easily given up after my first $500 investment went down the drain, but I didn't. Every failure taught me something valuable and brought me one step closer to success. If there's one piece of advice I can give to aspiring entrepreneurs, it's this: don't give up. Keep learning, keep adapting, and keep pushing forward. Success doesn't come overnight, but with persistence and hard work, it will come. My journey isn't over, and I'm still figuring things out. But I'm proud of how far I've come and excited about what's next. The road ahead is uncertain, but I wouldn't want it any other way. I'm grateful for every failure and every small victory along the way. They've all shaped me into the entrepreneur I am today. This is a long one, so grab a coffee. I'm sharing my journey of starting a small business and the ups and downs I went through over the last few years. Hopefully, it can inspire someone else or at least give some insight into what running a business is actually like behind the scenes. It wasn't easy, but it's been incredibly rewarding. I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Ever since I was young, I tried to figure out ways to make money. I sold lemonade, set up a mini car wash operation in my neighborhood, and later, even dabbled in reselling sneakers when I was in high school. But none of that felt like the one. I wanted something bigger, something I could build from the ground up. So, after college, when everyone was getting corporate jobs, I made a decision that shocked my family. I was going to start my own business. At first, it was a vague idea. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to work a 9 to 5 for someone else. I started doing what most new entrepreneurs do, brainstorming. For months, I thought about different industries and opportunities. I considered everything from tech to food delivery services, but nothing felt right. It wasn't until I found myself binge-watching YouTube videos on sustainable living that it clicked. I became obsessed with eco-friendly products. There was this new wave of consumers who cared about the planet, and I realized that there was a big opportunity in selling environmentally conscious products online. I decided to focus on eco-friendly home goods. I didn't have a clear product to sell yet, but I knew that if I could make a brand around sustainability, I could carve out a niche. My first step was research. I spent countless hours looking for eco-friendly suppliers, learning about sustainable materials, and figuring out where I could source products that weren't just trendy, but actually had a meaningful impact on the environment. I found a few suppliers, but there was a problem. Most of them had high minimum order quantities that I couldn't afford. It was an issue I would run into again and again as I tried to scale. With a small budget, I couldn't just go all in on products right away. I started small. I went to local craft fairs and farmers markets with a handful of eco-friendly products I had managed to source. I sold reusable straws, bamboo toothbrushes, and organic cotton tote bags. I talked to customers about how they could reduce waste, how important it was to support sustainable brands, and how small changes could make a big difference. The response was amazing. People were genuinely interested, and a few of them came back for more products. The seed was planted, and I knew I was onto something. The next big hurdle was the online store. I didn't have much money to spend on a fancy website, so I went with Shopify and designed a basic, clean site myself. Looking back, it was far from perfect, but it got the job done. I didn't want to waste time, so I immediately launched and started marketing through social media. I didn't have much of a budget for ads, so I relied heavily on Instagram, posting daily about sustainability tips, how-to guides, and featuring the products I was selling. I remember being ecstatic when I made my first sale online. It wasn't much, only $15, but it felt like a huge victory. As the months went on, my brand slowly started to grow. I began focusing on building a community around sustainability, sharing stories about eco-friendly living, and collaborating with other small brands who had a similar ethos. That helped to expand my reach and introduce me to new customers. But I was still struggling with the financial side of things. Inventory was expensive, shipping was a nightmare, and I was barely breaking even. I thought about giving up several times, especially when a couple of major suppliers I relied on decided to increase their prices by a ridiculous amount. That stung, but I didn't give up. Instead, I decided to diversify my product range. I started creating my own line of products, starting with bamboo dishware, which was both unique and sustainable. At first, it felt like an enormous risk. I had no idea if people would actually buy them. But I pushed forward, borrowing a little money from a family member to cover the production costs. This was the game changer. The bamboo dishware caught on like wildfire, especially when I ran a limited-time promotion on social media. Word spread, and sales skyrocketed. The increase in demand forced me to scale production quickly, and while it was chaotic, it was also incredibly rewarding. By the time the one-year mark rolled around, I had a small but steady stream of customers. I was still running things solo, doing everything from answering customer emails to packing and shipping orders. It was exhausting, but I was proud of how far I had come. That's when I realized that in order to grow further, I would need help. I hired my first employee, someone who could assist with customer service and logistics. That was another big leap, but it was necessary. Then came the challenge of competing with larger, more established brands. They had bigger marketing budgets, more extensive product lines, and faster delivery times. I knew I couldn't outspend them, but I could outserve them. I focused on providing the best customer service I could, fast responses, personalized thank you notes, and going the extra mile to make sure every customer was happy. It paid off in the form of repeat customers, word-of-mouth marketing, and positive reviews. Slowly, but surely, I started gaining ground. As the business grew, so did the complexities. Managing inventory, handling returns, dealing with customer complaints, and keeping up with shipping logistics became a full-time job in itself. I had to learn how to balance between running a business and maintaining my sanity. There were nights where I barely slept, wondering how I was going to keep up with everything. But I loved what I was building, and that passion kept me going. Fast forward to today, and I'm proud to say my small eco-friendly brand is thriving. We've expanded our product range, brought on a small team, and even launched our own subscription box for sustainable living products. What started as an idea to just sell some reusable straws has turned into a legitimate business, and I'm finally able to pay myself a steady salary. We're still small, but I can see the potential for bigger things. It hasn't been easy. I've made mistakes, lost money, and had moments of doubt. But I've learned more than I ever could have imagined, and the sense of accomplishment I feel when I look back at where I started is indescribable. If I could give any advice to someone thinking about starting their own business, it would be this: stay consistent, be patient, and don't be afraid to fail. You will make mistakes, and things will go wrong. But it's all part of the journey. If you're passionate and willing to put in the work, it will eventually pay off. Starting a business is hard, but for me, it's been worth every sleepless night. I can't wait to see where it goes from here. So, this is a story of how I started a business from scratch, went through some major ups and downs, and learned some lessons I wish I had known before jumping in. It's a bit of a roller coaster, but I think it might resonate with a lot of people here. Grab some popcorn, and here it goes. Back in 2015, I was working at a tech company doing data analysis. It wasn't a terrible job, but it wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. I'd always been entrepreneurial. I remember trying to start my first business when I was 14, selling knockoff wristwatches on eBay. Needless to say, it didn't last long, and I learned a hard lesson in inventory management and customer service. But I'd always been fascinated by how businesses were built from the ground up. The company I worked for had a lot of smart people, but it wasn't a place I saw myself growing in. I hated the idea of spending another 20 years in a cubicle, so I started brainstorming ways to get out. I knew I wanted to create something that had value, something that could grow. I didn't have millions of dollars to invest, and I didn't have a big network either, so I needed to come up with a practical, cost-effective idea. I had one thing going for me. I was really into fitness. At that point, I had been going to the gym for several years, and I was always on the lookout for new ways to improve my performance. I had started dabbling in nutritional supplements, trying different protein powders, pre-workouts, and BCAAs, branched-chain amino acids. It was during this period that I realized something. Most of the supplements I was buying had poor transparency, strange ingredients, or just didn't deliver on their promises. That was the spark. I started doing research into the supplement industry. I learned that a lot of products were either overpriced or didn't contain the ingredients they promised. Even worse, a lot of the supplements out there were made in factories that cut corners, making them less effective or even harmful. I thought to myself, what if I could make a line of supplements that was transparent, effective, and affordable? The idea of building a brand that was honest and really focused on quality seemed like a gap in the market. I didn't know the first thing about creating supplements or running a business, but I did know that I was passionate about it. So, I started reaching out to supplement manufacturers. I emailed a few companies that made products for other brands, asking if they would be willing to help me formulate my own products. I got a few responses, most of which were not helpful, but then one company took the time to reply and said they'd be happy to talk more. I went to their facility and spent days there, learning about the process. I watched how they mixed the ingredients, how they made sure everything was tested, and how they adhered to FDA regulations. Honestly, it was eye-opening. I had no idea how complex and regulated the industry was. But at the same time, it was exciting to see how much potential there was to make a real impact. Now, I had a product, but I didn't have a brand. I didn't want to create just another fitness supplement brand. I wanted it to stand for something. I decided I'd focus on a few key principles: transparency, science-backed products, and a commitment to sustainability. I named the brand Pureform Nutrition because it reflected the pure, clean, and effective formulas I wanted to offer. The first step was to create a website. I knew nothing about building websites, so I spent hours learning about Shopify, WordPress, and how to set up a functional e-commerce platform. It wasn't pretty at first, but I launched it with just a couple of products, a pre-workout and a protein powder. Honestly, I didn't expect much to happen. I thought, maybe a couple of my friends would buy it, and that would be that. But to my surprise, people started buying. It wasn't a flood, but it was steady. I had about $3,000 saved up from my job, and I used that to cover production and marketing costs. I ran Facebook and Instagram ads, which led to a handful of sales. I didn't have the budget to do influencer marketing or fancy brand partnerships, so I relied on word of mouth and small-scale campaigns. The next few months were a blur. I was working full-time at my tech job, and I'd spend all my spare time building my supplement brand. I'd get up at 5 a.m. to run ads and manage customer orders, then I'd work all day at my job and come home to pack orders and figure out logistics. I was exhausted, but I was seeing progress, so it kept me going. Slowly, I began building a loyal customer base who appreciated the transparency and quality of my products. Then came my first real crisis. After about 6 months of running the business, we hit a major setback. Our supplier sent us a batch of protein powder that didn't meet our quality standards. I had to make the tough decision to recall it. We lost a ton of money on that, and our reputation took a hit. I spent weeks answering customer emails, offering refunds, and trying to rebuild trust. It was a tough time. I seriously considered quitting. But then, I remembered why I started in the first place. I wasn't doing this for the money. I wanted to create something meaningful. So, I made some changes. I found a new supplier who had better quality control practices, and I worked on improving the customer experience. I also doubled down on content marketing, sharing more educational resources on social media about the benefits of the ingredients in my products. By 2018, the business had started gaining more momentum. We weren't exactly rolling in cash, but we were profitable enough to reinvest into growing the brand. I hired my first full-time employee, a customer service rep who helped me manage the increasing number of inquiries and orders. I also expanded our product line to include more supplements like post-workout recovery and fat burners. In 2019, I decided to quit my day job. I felt like the business was finally stable enough to support me full-time. The decision wasn't easy. I had security, benefits, and a steady paycheck at the tech company, but I knew it was the right move. That year, Pureform Nutrition did its first 7-figure revenue, and we started expanding our reach through more marketing channels and collaborations. As I reflect on the journey, I realize how much I learned about business, resilience, and the importance of staying true to your values. It hasn't been easy, and there have been many moments when I thought about giving up, but I'm glad I kept going. Today, Pureform Nutrition is a thriving brand, and we've built a loyal community of customers who trust us. I'm incredibly proud of what we've achieved, but I also know there's still a long road ahead. We're working on expanding our product line even further, improving our sustainability efforts, and getting more involved in community outreach. So, if you're thinking about starting your own business, here's my advice. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to happen overnight. There will be setbacks, failures, and moments when you want to quit. But if you truly believe in what you're doing and stay committed, you can make it happen. Don't be afraid to learn as you go, and never underestimate the value of hard work and persistence. That's my story. Thanks for reading, and I hope it helps someone here. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.